What's up, military millionaires? Today I want to talk to you about how to choose a market for real estate investing. Look, if I had a nickel for every time I heard that the reason somebody hasn't begun investing in real estate is that they couldn't figure out how to choose a market, I'd probably have at least a few more nickels to my name. Okay, that wasn't funny. But look, I hear this excuse all the time. So I decided to write this article to explain how I would choose a market if I was starting over. This is also how I will analyze potential markets as I choose to expand my operations going forward. So whether you like it or not, as a military real estate investor, you will most likely end up investing from a distance eventually. Think of it this way. If you start investing long distance now, you did. But if you start investing now and then you get orders elsewhere, ta-da, long distance. You could look at this as a disadvantage or, like I do, an advantage. If you know that you'll have to invest in real estate long distance, then you can choose any market in the nation to invest in. It really doesn't matter. For many real estate investors, choosing a market for real estate investing is not an easy feat. Many of these investors are overthinking things though, and this video will help you get past these doubts and choose the right market today so that you can finally move on to building your team, which is the next step in this whole process. Look, there are two types of lenses that you should look through when choosing a market. The first is the macro lens, which means you're looking at the market as a whole compared to other markets. An example of this would be like lining up the Honolulu market and comparing it as a whole to the San Diego market. The second lens is micro factors, which we will get to later on, but look at the closer picture. The simplest place to begin with this search is with a market that you're familiar with. This could be any number of markets, and as a service member, you've likely seen multiple. I, for example, grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas, but have lived in San Diego, California, Kaneohe, Hawaii, Springfield, Missouri, and not to include places across the world, halfway, whatever, outside this country. This has given me a huge advantage in choosing a real estate market, and ultimately has allowed me to try different strategies in various markets. Currently, all of my rental properties are in Missouri, simply because that's where I was living when I first got started in real estate, so I was familiar with it. Now, I figured it would be easier to learn how to invest locally at the time, and then I just continued long-distance real estate investing there because I was familiar and already had a team. Now that I understand how to invest in real estate, I would gladly invest in any market that fits my style of investing, provided that I'm able to build the right team, which does matter. You should think of locations where you have connections, or maybe you enjoyed living there. Perhaps you'd like to live or retire there one day. But if none of these work for you, then analyze other markets. It's always nice to invest somewhere familiar though, because familiarity often equates to comfort, and you've got to be comfortable investing in whatever market you choose. Now, you should also look at where other people are investing. Whether you know them personally or not, if a market has a lot of active investors, it could be an indicator of a good market. But that's a double-edged sword though, because too much competition will drive prices higher, and that may or may not be a good thing depending on when you jump in on the market. One of the most important market criteria for me is the price to rent ratio. In fact, the only thing more important is ensuring that you smash the like button if you find this video proving helpful. Look, this simple ratio, the price to rent ratio, can make or break a market for me. Simply put, this is the amount of rent that a property will bring in, on average, per dollar it costs for me to purchase a home. For example, for an average price to rent ratio would be like a $100,000 purchase price equals $1,000 average rent. Price to rent ratio is 1%. A high price to rent ratio would be like a $80,000 purchase price with an average rent of $1,000 a month, which is like a 1.25% price to rent ratio. Now, a low price rent ratio, which is something that you often see in places like Hawaii and San Diego, would be like a $600,000 purchase price, but only $3,000 average rent, which is like a 0.5% price to rent ratio. Now, you've probably heard of the 1% rule for rental property investing before, and that's exactly what the price to rent ratio is. If you plan to invest in buy and hold real estate, it is important that you understand this simple metric. If you invest in a market where it's fairly easy to find 1% price to rent ratio properties, then it will be simple to build your portfolio. If, on the other hand, you invest in a market where it's extremely difficult to find a property that will break even from rental income, you may need to have a lot more cash reserves for each property, and it might take a lot longer for you to build your portfolio. I am personally very hesitant to buy and hold any rental property that doesn't cash flow. I want to know that I can hold on to this property through the next bubble, recession, virus, or whatever that might be. Now, you also want to look at a growth versus stability, right? So do you want to invest in a growth market or a stable one? I'm going to use two markets I'm familiar with to explain this concept. San Diego, California is very much a growth market. At the height of the market in 2007, the median home price was, I don't remember exactly, but like $620,000. By like 2012, it was down in the like 300, 400, 500, it dropped a lot. And then now it's back up over 680, 700, something like that. So San Diego's a growth market, meaning that there's a huge swing between the highs and lows of appreciation, which appreciation can help build wealth very quickly. Now, Springfield, on the other hand, was kind of like, boop, during the 2008-2009 bubble. It was a small blip in the market during the last crash. And home values have stayed fairly linear with their rise and fall over the years. Now, this is an example of a more stable market, meaning that you will see much less appreciation, but the market value will not plummet as wildly during a recession. I think the best way to determine which of these market types suits you best is to fall back on your niche. If you plan to flip homes and wholesale real estate, a growth market could be great for you. Now, if you plan to buy and hold rental properties for the long haul in order to live off the cash flow, perhaps a stable market is better for you. Another factor is your risk acceptance or aversion. If you are extremely risk averse, I recommend looking for a stable real estate market so you don't pull your hair out anytime there's a potential recession appearing on the horizon. If, on the other hand, you have a high risk tolerance, perhaps you'll enjoy the more volatile, higher appreciation markets. I must caution you, though, you should always view appreciation as a bonus and not as a given. If you bank on appreciation, eventually you could get burned pretty badly. Not to say that the market won't appreciate, but if you buy at the wrong time and you can't hold it, it doesn't matter if it appreciates long term if you lose the house. Now, the next factor is population growth. And this is one of the most telling signs of a market. I like to see at least 1% population growth annually for the last 5 or 10 years. Obviously, the more population grows, the more housing demand there will be. And I am wary of any market that has a declining population because unless there's an easily recognizable and resolvable reason for it. Now, you can find this data by looking at the census data or local county data or just citydata.com. And I love citydata.com. I would just say you get all your data from there. Now, this is the easiest place to gather all sorts of data for your market you're analyzing. And again, I just highly recommend you check it out when comparing potential markets. I really like it. The next factor is economic growth. You want to know if the economy is growing. This always seems to be like a no-brainer to me, but after the economic downfall we saw in March of 2020, it should be obvious just how much of an effect the economy can have on a market. Now, I like to see an increase in median income, influx of new businesses, new types of businesses, and an overall growing economy. If the economy dies in a city, you can be certain that it's only a matter of time before the population declines, the market value dissolves, and it's just a mess. The second piece of the economy that you want to watch for is diversity. Look at what happened to Detroit, who relied very heavily on the auto industry and not a whole lot else. And their market's been just steadily declining for a long time as a result of what's going on with the auto industry. And obviously there's other factors. Now, you want to know that your market is not too heavily reliant on any one section of the economy. So I like markets that have a large health and education sector because that means there'll always be a need for hospitals and education, which aren't going anywhere. I also love to see a growing tech industry as well as a stable industrial sector. There are so many industries out there and they all add and subtract to the economy differently. Just try to be diverse and not like 75% in one economic, vein. So take some time to really dig into what industries are in your market and understand whether or not they are a growing industry or a dying one. And think future, right? I don't know, industrial might last, it might not. Tech is probably staying around for a while. Now, the more diverse your economy is, the better. Okay, landlord-friendly versus tenant-friendly states. This isn't necessarily a deal breaker for me, but you need to understand the landlord laws in your state. California, for example, is notoriously tenant-friendly, while my home of residence, Arkansas, favors their landlords a lot. Understanding tenant and landlord laws will help you budget for eviction expenses and other issues that could arise. I definitely prefer landlord-friendly states, but it isn't necessary for me. It makes life easier when stuff goes wrong. There's always a way to buffer for bad tenants, and if I have to hold larger cash reserves for eviction issues to get into a great market, then that's totally fine by me. Now, without getting too political, which is not the intent of this statement, a simple way to kind of determine what your state's landlord policy is to ask yourself if it's more liberal or conservative state. More liberal states are almost always tenant friendly, whereas more conservative states are almost always landlord friendly. Now, these things seem to go fairly hand in hand, so understanding the political climate of your potential market is valuable as well. Because even if a state is very landlord friendly now, if it's growing and becoming a more liberal population, then there's a chance as time progresses that these policies could change and they could become much more tenant friendly, and that's just something to keep your eye on. So the political piece in this is just food for thought. It is definitely wise to research all the landlord laws when choosing a market to invest in real estate. Just do your homework. You also need to look at the crime rate from both a macro and a micro perspective. Now, on the macro level, I would be hesitant to invest anywhere that has an extremely high crime rate throughout the market. The major things I look for here is what kind of crime it is, or what kind of crime is highest, and I like to try to understand if there's a reason for it. If a market has very high rate of looting and robbery, that might be really worrisome. But if the market had just had a hurricane pass through and all this looting and robbery happened during that time, it might have just been more survival and not necessarily ideal, but, more understandable. Now, my market appeared to have a very high murder rate a few years back. And when I really dug into this, I realized there were only like 2 or 3 instances where multiple people were murdered. Now, that's obviously not ideal, but those 2 or 3 instances spiked the murder rate per capita, but realistically, the number of instances were still very low. So understanding that, I was a little bit more okay with it, even though it's still not an ideal number. Now, this isn't the biggest factor for me on a macro level, but I generally refrain from investing anywhere that I would not be okay living, and that's just a good rule of thumb for me. All right, I hinted about this earlier, but comfort. The most important thing about choosing a market for real estate investing is that you must be comfortable with the market. It could be the best market in the world, but if you're not comfortable, then you'll never be able to pull the trigger on properties. As you're researching all of these macro factors, you need to ensure that you are comfortable with the outcome. I just don't consider this negotiable. If you're looking at a bunch of markets and one of them you're just like, I'm never gonna wanna do anything there, scrap it. Doesn't matter how good the data is. Focus on the other one. Do not choose a market because other people are. Choose it because you believe that it is a good market. Now, onto the micro factors, which are the zoomed in, closer items. Micro factors are those that affect your real estate market locally. These are the factors that will help you hone in on what zip codes, neighborhoods, suburbs, or whatever that you want to focus on inside of your market. This is going to depend a lot on your specific investing strategy and where we are in the market cycle. If you're wanting to buy, rehab, refinance, rent, repeat homes in part of town that are becoming more gentrified, you'll be purchasing in a different area than if you want to purchase A-class or Class A apartment complexes for student housing. Now, I believe crime rates are actually more important on the micro level because every market is going to have great neighborhoods and less than ideal ones. And it's your job to figure out what neighborhoods or zip codes have crime rates that you are okay with and which ones that you want to stay away from. There are several ways you can generally find this information in the form of crime heat maps, worst case scenario. You can always just talk to the local police department, sheriff's department. And another great way to figure this out is just simply ask a few local property managers, what area of town would they avoid? My property manager has no problem telling me, stay away from that part. Okay, great, I'll stay away from that part. Hey, if the property manager doesn't want to manage your property there, might not be the best place to invest. Look, the reason that you want to be really familiar with your market is to be able to take advantage of local amenities. Investing near a hospital or a college or major employers or even just a social hotspot can be a great strategy. These areas bring consistent tenants and generally thrive in the better areas of town. I also enjoy and love investing near downtown because there are a lot of amenities and gentrification is often going to occur. And maybe people like the walk score, I don't know. If you have an active downtown, it could be a great area to invest because people like living there. Take the time to learn where the social hangouts and large employers and colleges, in other words, nice areas of town are, because people will want to live in these places and are often willing to pay a little bit more of a premium to do so. Another micro factor to consider when choosing a market for investing is the ease of commute. This could be anything from the walk score, I think Zillow does that, around employers or downtown, to just the amount of traffic that people will face daily. A lot of people enjoy living outside of the city, and this could be due to lower cost of living or owning more land or getting away from the hustle and bustle of the city or whatever. Understanding commute times throughout your city is useful for looking into what neighborhoods afford these luxuries while still avoiding massive commute times. This is not a major concern, but little micro factors like this matter to people, and understanding where people might want to live just based on the area and the shortened commute time is beneficial. Now, school districts. If you are investing in a single family homes, then there's a good chance that you will be renting to families. One of the biggest factors people consider when buying or renting a home for their families is the school district it is in. So if you can find a neighborhood that meets all of the above criteria and is in a great school district, that's just a huge win. A less desirable school district isn't necessarily a showstopper, but it can hinder your tenant pool for families. Just some food for thought. All right, here's the too long didn't read, except it's a video and obviously you made it here, so ta-da. But look at population trends, economic diversity, landlord laws, crime rate, and other such data to evaluate what market you want to choose for real estate investing. Then become intimately familiar with that market and learn what parts of town have the best employers, schools, social hotspots, and for lack of a better word, vibes. Now, this is the triple X mark the spot, I don't know. Look, if you take nothing else away from this video, please listen to this. Many investors take all of this information and they narrow it down to 5 or 10 real estate markets. And then they go absolutely cross-eyed trying to figure out which one is the perfect one for them to invest in. So here's what I have to say to you. If you have managed to narrow down every single potential real estate investing market in the nation to just 5 or 10, just pick one. Line them all out and throw a dart. You're telling me that out of every market in the entire nation, these are the 5 best. That means that they are all awesome. So you need to just stop worrying about the minute details and just pick one and get started. Don't get deer in the headlights syndrome now and freeze trying to determine the perfect market. Choose one, never look back. As your business grows, you can easily expand into 1 or 2 of the others, but just pick one and go. Get off the X. Just make a decision. Don't get stuck trying to find the perfect market. If you narrow it down to 5 out of the nation, they're all good. So for now, pick a market and begin building your team so that you can start taking action to find your financial freedom. If you found this video helpful, please go ahead and subscribe. Hit the little bell so you get notified when new videos post. And let me know what you want more videos of. I am here to help. Have a great day.